Hello, my name is Dave Lenti. I've been a Christ follower since I was 32 years old, and this year I'll roll up on the big 7-0. I don't know what happened. It disappeared rather quickly, but the length of my time of following Christ is not as important as how I became a follower of Christ. I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts, Southbridge, Massachusetts, town of about 18,000 people, and grew up in the 50s and 60s. Had a stay-at-home mom, as most women at that time were at home with their children. And my dad ran a business, a small department store in our hometown. And good, solid family, have one sibling, a sister, who is still alive. My parents have since passed on. And we had a good family life, a lot of family activities with extended family, which was great. But one thing that was never part of our life was church. My parents were not involved with church at all. We didn't even go to the annual Easter or Christmas services. It just wasn't there. Yet we did celebrate Christmas and we did celebrate Easter with extended family, but it just wasn't part of my upbringing. Didn't think anything about that. I have to tell you, my parents were good, solid, moral people. I guess I caught more principles from them than they taught me, but that was their way of teaching me. Worked with my dad in his store all through high school and college, and I watched him as a businessman, and I think all of my business experience in the future were all influenced by the way he dealt with people, both the customers as well as the vendors who sold him products. In 1969, I met the woman who would become my wife at a wedding. She was the maid of honor, and I was the best man, and that was kind of fun and neat. She didn't want anything to do with me right away, but I eventually wore her down, and she agreed to marry me, which I'm grateful for. And in that first year of marriage, we got married in early '71. In first year of marriage, we had our first child, rather surprised that early, and her name is Beth. And we ended up transferring from Massachusetts to St. Louis. So a lot of things happened quickly. And I have to tell you, as I look at it now as an old guy, Carol and I moved to St. Louis with a 10-day-old baby. She came off the plane with a 10-day-old child, and I am sure all the old women on the plane were just horrified that this young woman was taking this, essentially a newborn. And when she came off the plane, I said to her, hey, great, hon, because I had to drive out ahead of time. I said, we got a little problem. The moving van hasn't showed up yet. So we had a diaper bag and one bottle of formula. 4 o'clock that afternoon, the moving van showed up, and by 7 o'clock, the house was settled. Didn't have a whole lot of stuff back in the day. We transferred again a couple years later to Indianapolis, and then my original company that had moved me to St. Louis moved us to Massachusetts, like back again. But I get ahead of myself a little bit. Carol, when we were living in Indianapolis, became a believer with one of her girlfriends. They decided to study the Bible. And eventually, some family members of this other young lady witnessed to them, and they accepted the Lord. I thought that was great. I was glad for her. It was meaningful to her, but I could have cared less. So anyway, as I mentioned, we had gone back to Massachusetts, and then in 1976, another transfer, actually company change, came into play, and we transferred to Richmond. Moved to Virginia, to the Richmond area, and man, I thought I had it all together. I had the job I wanted. I was a district sales manager for a national company selling industrial valves and controls to power companies, paper mills, chemical companies in Virginia and Maryland. And at that point, we did have a second child, Sarah. And I've got to tell you, we had a nice home, had a great family, but I wasn't happy. I was pretty good at my job. And my customers respected me, and that respect from them was really critical to me. And I was really nice to them because they were providing the bread and butter for my family. But I'd get home at night, or when I get home at the end of the workday, I wasn't particularly nice to Carol and the girls. I was very short with them. I wasn't physically abusive, but I probably was verbally abusive and emotionally abusive, and I just wasn't happy. I didn't know what was wrong. I didn't have any sense of peace or contentment in my life, and yet I had everything that I thought I wanted: a beautiful wife, two healthy girls, and the job that I really wanted. Well, in our neighborhood, which was in Brookfield off of Providence Road, which not too far from here, there was a couple, Jim and Louise, and they had two girls who were exactly the same age as my Beth and my Sarah. And they were a really neat couple. We spent a lot of time with them. The kids would play together, we'd go on picnics and whatever. And I watched them, and I didn't know what they had, but I wanted it. They were very comfortable with each other, clearly deeply in love with one another, deeply in love with their family, and I just wasn't sure what was going on. Well, over a period of time, about a year and a half, I guess, after we met them, they invited us to a picnic that the church was having. And they went to Bon Air Baptist Church. And the picnic was way out on Howe Street Road, past Cloverdale High School, which I thought at the time was the end of the world. Couldn't imagine anybody living out here, and here we all are. Anyway, this gentleman owned a piece of property, had a lake on it, and we just had the best time, met a lot of fun people. No one, much to my relief, hit me over the head with the Bible. No one approached me in that regard. We just had a good time. The only thing, quote unquote, religious about it was we prayed before the meal. Fine, I could handle that. Short time later, maybe within a couple weeks, 3 weeks, Jim and Louise invited us to a Sunday evening service at Bon Air, where the youth group was putting on a musical. And because I liked them so much, I didn't want to disappoint them and say no. So I said, okay, we'll go. And we went. And the youth group put on a play, again, a musical called Celebrate Life. And it was a story of Christ. And if you know anything about Bon Air, they have a huge music program. It was extremely well done. The kids acted, and these are mostly teenagers and maybe early college, did an excellent job presenting the play. And when I left there, I said, my goodness, they really believe this. And it was the first time, I get a little choked up here, first time I said, maybe there's something to this, what I thought was a fairy tale, the story of Christ. So didn't think much about that, other than, pondering that just a little bit. Within, a month or 6 weeks, Carol got a phone call, and Carol, by the way, had started attending Bon Air several months earlier. Carol got a phone call from an older couple who is about 20 years my junior right now. They were maybe 50, and we figured, of course, they were quite old at that point in time, inviting us to a Bible study for young couples, and they've been praying about who to invite. Excuse me. And Carol said, I don't know if Dave will want to go, but she said, hey, this is what's going on. Would you be interested? I said, okay, we'll go. Kind of a side note, the couple who were so instrumental in getting us involved and who we continue to stay in touch with, they weren't interested in that kind of thing, so they weren't even going, but we met a bunch of other folks who we still stay in touch with all these years later. And Paul, who was leading the study, the husband of the couple, we get to the house and had refreshments and sit down, and he said, what do you think the number one problem I believe he said in the world is, but it may have been in the United States, it doesn't matter. And of course, being a salesman, I engaged my mouth before my brain, and I said, too many blank lawyers in the world, and you can fill in the blank. And he said, that may be, but that's not what I'm looking for. And he said, it's sin. So, and then he went on to tell us we're going to study this book called One Home Under God by Jack Taylor. And we did. Let me come back to that in just a second. We get in the car that evening to leave, and Carol said, Dave, you idiot, Paul's a lawyer. I said, well, it doesn't matter. It's still the same situation. It's still true. Anyway, Paul has turned out to be our lawyer for many years and just a wonderful gentleman. So anyway, we went through that study, One Home Under God, and it was so practical. It talked about everything from budgeting, from bringing up the kids, relationships of husbands and wives, you name it. It covered it all. And I started attending church with Carol. And so that was probably October of '77 when we started this Bible study. And we're in church one Sunday morning in February of '78. And if you know anything about the Baptist churches, they are going to give you an altar call every Sunday. They're looking forward to people coming up there. And so this one morning, I really felt convicted that I needed to go forward. So Pastor Cochran gives the call, and I get up to leave, and Carol said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I got to go." She said, "Can't you wait? It's only be a few more minutes. You go to the bathroom later." I said, "That's not it." So I went up there because she's dying in the puke. And I said, that was really nice to her later, trying to hold me back, even trying to have me become a Christian all these years. And I accepted the Lord, at least made that public profession. I think I'd accepted him earlier. And again, being a Baptist church, the next week you were in the baptismal pool, and which was pretty neat, actually, because it really cemented that in my mind, even though, as we know, baptism does not confer, I'm struggling for the word, salvation on us. It's your saving faith, you accepting what Christ has done for us. And interestingly enough, I felt like the weight of the world was off my shoulders. And I was never concerned, and I'm still not concerned about what happens to me after I die. And now that I'm getting older, I need to think about that a little bit, and I'm hoping it's going to be a while. But that's kind of a bonus for me, because I do know what will happen. But what I found was a real peace, an inner peace, and a contentment with who I was, a contentment with my family, my situation, and understood, I think, at some basic level, that no matter what was going on in my life, how big an issue it might have been or small an issue, I had someone I could turn to, and that was Christ. And he could help me through that. And has it been just a wonderful walk all these years? No. There's been struggles. We're people. We sin. We continue to fight with things. And I'm no different than anyone else. And we prayed about, for example, we've prayed about some things for many, many years and haven't seen an answer to that prayer yet. And yet I do believe that eventually, in his time, in his will, it will turn out the way he wants it to be. And so I know in whom I believe, and because of that, I have real peace and contentment.